Welcome to Shameless. Here we explore the transformative power of courage in action.
Did you miss me?
So there were people who thought I'd been kicked off of the podcast.
What?
Yeah, they were like, yo, dude, you're out. Is that... And I'm like, ouch, ouch. So I had to come back and kick you out so that I could be actually the person in the pod. So did I miss you? You hurt my feelings. That's all I'm going to say.
So sorry. That must be a misunderstanding. This is your podcast. I'm just a mere pleb filling in when your busy schedule can't handle it.
Well, I'm glad we've set the record straight. So now that we're on my pod, I'd like to welcome all the listeners to Shameless. It is the space for transformation and for vulnerability. So let's get into it.
Welcome to Shameless. Here we explore the transformative power of courage in action.
Hi, my name is Nona Butiti.
And I'm Zika Ngaidzo.
So today we are going to start with the quote, I am because we are. And this is really encompasses the concept of Ubuntu, but I think it really works well with the topic that we have for today.
And what is our topic today?
Social intelligence.
Explain.
Go further.
Go further.
Hopefully, we all know about IQ or intelligence, which is what we presume we're born with. It plays a large part in how we understand the world and interpret the world. But social intelligence, on the other hand, apparently is mostly learned, okay? So it's going to develop from experiences, from your failures, successes, from watching other people fail and succeed. And that's basically the concept of social intelligence. And there are a couple of main key elements in social intelligence, which I think we can explore in this podcast. One really being around verbal fluency and conversational skills. And this is basically that person who is in a room who can float around and talk to anybody. You know, the social butterflies is what we call them. And what I want to highlight is that you don't have to be an introvert or an extrovert to be a social butterfly, because when we think about personality types and understanding ourselves, I look at introvertedness and extrovertedness as a sense of energy, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're introverted, you probably get drained being around a lot of people. And if you're extroverted, you probably gain energy from being around people. But it doesn't actually mean because you're introverted, you can't be a social butterfly. It just means after you're flapping your wings at home, you're in a cocoon.
And that's actually very interesting, because a lot of the conceptions are that an introvert is somebody who doesn't talk or can't talk. They typically are associated to capability as opposed to energy. And I actually believe that over the years, I've actually learned how to talk and to actually be able to communicate better. And therefore, one might actually suggest or think that I am an extrovert.
You're not an extrovert.
I get tired from talking to people. That's
okay. So then I'm also not an extrovert.
I guess the two extroverts here on the podcast. So I guess that kind of works, right?
Okay. So when you look at verbal fluency, one of the main things is about carrying a conversation with a wide variety of people. And I think for me, why I'm probably able to do that is because I have moved around a lot. And I've been exposed to a lot of different types of people. But then for people who haven't had that sort of background or haven't forced themselves in situations where you're interacting with different types of people, how can you cultivate that? Because you just mentioned yourself that you've improved in your conversation style as the years have gone by.
So for me, I actually look at it as a very deliberate thing that you have to acknowledge that you want to work on. And so you then put yourselves in position where you are interacting with people and reflecting upon those interactions. And so in that, there are two parts to it. The first one is you being there and having those interactions, but then the second part is for reflection. And if one is able to interact, you start to realize that there are a couple of rules of engagement, what not to do, what to do. in a very normal setting. So it would be completely strange for an individual to say obscenities in a setting, and you know that you're not supposed to do that, or you're
Cussing in church, basically.
cussing in church, or you actually know that you're supposed to speak out loud as opposed to speaking relatively quietly. But in order for that to happen, you also need to have feedback if you don't actually pick it up yourself. And getting that feedback is number one, internally, but also through other people. And that then allows for you to continue sharpening the saw.
Okay, fair point. Now, the other thing around social intelligence is social cognition, basically understanding how the social world works. I even think that you can extrapolate this to saying understanding culture, right? How people do things here. Because you need to have a knowledge of the social roles, rules, and scripts that when I started this, I said, you learn this as you go around in terms of social intelligence. So when you understand the various roles that you're playing in, whether it's informal rules or norms that govern your interactions, you know how to quote unquote play the game of those social interactions. And as a result, you become socially sophisticated and
Wise?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
All right.
So how can you actually, in terms of like entering into a new social setting, quickly gauge what are the rules of engagement here? What are the social norms? What govern the social interactions without maybe making faux pas?
So, actually, I'm going to go a bit wayward on this one, because sometimes I actually think it's beneficial to be authentically yourself, unapologetically yourself. And so even sometimes those social cognitions and social norms, to a degree, you can actually push up against them. But obviously there are moments in time. So for me, typically, in formal settings, you need to be able to actually carry yourself in a way that to a degree, imitates the room, and not necessarily go too far off. It's like, always very curious as to what are people going to wear to this function, because I don't want to be the one completely left field. And so in order for me to understand what people are wearing, it's always good to have people or individuals who you're going to go with, and those can also help gauge whether you're wearing the right clothing or if you're socially in the right space in terms of the norms and the rules.
So can we assume that you are not the person who is going to a function pretending like you're going to go to another fancier function because you're overdressed?
Hell no. I would like and would prefer to dress down for an occasion, because
What?
yeah, I don't want to take the spotlight from whoever's function it is, busy out here looking like, Idris Elba or, Denzel Washington.
Wow. Talk about mirror neurons later on, and I think you might need to check you. I think another thing that you can do around social rules and norms when you get into a culturally different space is ask the people who are in that space, is it all right if I address people who are older than me by their first name, or are they going to be upset? Or is it all right if I address that specific person by their first name?
Well, that specific way.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to just ask the people who are in that space. I agree that being authentic is important, but I also think that it's important to also have humility in the cultural spaces that you work in. So, for example, in certain cultures, women have to dress a specific way when they're going to special spaces. That's across the African continent, that's living in Asia, and instead of going, I am going to be women rights and in my mini skirt, I think that there's nothing wrong with being humble enough to just follow the cultural norms and respecting those norms.
That actually reminds me of some point way back. I walked in a different country. I walked into a shop, and in this shop people look at me and I'm like, I am the guy here trying to buy something.
Mhm.
And they go, you didn't greet.
I can guess what country that is, but I'm not going to say anything.
And I'm like, and I was shocked because I was just like, I'm feeling kind of harassed right now. I'm feeling kind of harassed right now because I'm just here in a space, minding my own business, and then I get this sort of really big pushback. And the reality of it all is that whole interaction was a function of misunderstood norms. And I walked into a space with a level of arrogance that my norm is the norm and the right norm at that. But the reality of it all was that, and what ended up happening then was I walked into the space and I ended up disrespecting people, whether intentionally or unintentionally. That was something that I ended up doing. And what ends up happening, what I've seen a lot of the time, is that people expect your norms to be actually adopted and adapted by those who you interact with for no reason beyond the fact that you feel you're more superior. And in a space like that, you lack the humility to actually have an intelligent, socially intelligent interaction with individuals and with humans for that. We have your quote being, I am because we are, because it's a function of me and you and we. That story always just resonates quite strongly with me.
Yeah, greet. That would just...
That's the moral of the story. I mean, that is the moral of the story. But again, I think about another thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go for medicals at some point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I walk in to the area
Mm-hmm.
wearing shorts, and they would not actually attend to me. They said I have to go.
Why?
Because it's disrespectful to be coming into...
Okay, after this, I need to know where this was because I'm so curious.
But the thing is, though it seems a very simple task...
Wait, no, they really said they can't
Yes,
do medicals because you're in shorts.
that's correct. And I actually got sent to a naughty corner. I got kicked out to actually consider what I've done, because
Oh my God. Why did you come make this up?
and they said, they were like, you wouldn't go to court wearing shorts.
Why wouldn't you go to court? Are you guilty? I'm just trying to understand.
Why am I in court? Why am I in
Yeah,
court?
why are you in court? Like, all these like, are you not just in the back listening to people?
Yeah, so I mean, and those are very classic examples of whereby I think when you talked about humility, it's such a very powerful thing. And further to that, effective listening skills.
Mhm.
You know, when you have effective listening skills, you open up that opportunity to be socially intelligent, and you come away from an interaction either feeling having been heard or having connected with individuals. And through that whole process, that's where trust and bonds get built. And without trust and without that connection, it becomes very difficult to both find each other and both to understand where one person is coming from. And so I think this concept of the social intelligence is something that we might take for granted at moments, because we think that it's part of it's something that's common sense, if you want to call it. But the reality is that it's not that common. And in fact, you have to actually be quite intentional, number one. Number two, you have to be self-aware. And then beyond that, you have to have humility.
So, nature versus nurture. Because, when you understand what makes people tick, right? That's a mark of being socially intelligent. And when you talk about listening effectively and that connection, building trust and all those things, that then definitely forms that high level of emotional intelligence as well, right? Because you're understanding maybe that person's not feeling great. You're truly trying to understand who they are. Now, is that you were raised right? Was that just you're in an environment that forced you to know about those things? Like, what's your take on that?
I think in a lot of instances, both your past experiences as well as the intentional steps towards getting to a certain point play a large role. So you could very easily not necessarily have experienced something, but because you innately have the character to want to be curious, for you to want to listen, for you to reflect on certain things, then you'll find that you might pick up on, well, when I said this thing to an individual, they weren't actually happy. I must have done something wrong. And as long as you've got that humility to be able to then ask, to be able to listen, to be able to understand, then you might actually get to a place where, though it might not be part of your nurturing or your past, it is something that you're able to develop and grow. And none of these skills, I personally believe, are impossible to grow. The thing is, do you want to?
So then how does that play into having self-efficacy? And when I say self-efficacy, I just mean you're able to play different social roles in different situations when you're interacting with different types of people, right? Because if you're socially intelligent, I'm assuming that you have that self-confidence, you understand how to interact with different types of people. How does that work?
And sometimes I want to behave like a 10-year-old. I can tell you that for free.
Dude, you and me both. Like, you're just lucky that I'm a mature person, because if I wasn't mature,
I'll give you a piece of my mind. But at the end of the day, one of the major aspects for me is keeping the important things first. The first things first. So as long as I understand where I'm trying to get to, why I'm trying to have this conversation, where I'm trying to be in terms of an interaction, a connection, and or any actions that I'm involved in, the important thing is to know I'm in this for X, therefore I don't need to get caught up in maybe an emotional space. I need to be able to step back, reflect, and then walk through the paces where, in essence, that then allows for me to play the roles that are needed within moments. Being able to also understand when it's a good time for jokes or not. I'm typically somebody who can actually really fight off trying to tell a really bad joke in a bad moment. But at the end of the day, experiences are the things that really teach us a lot. But the key is to reflect upon those experiences so that you don't have repetition of bad experiences.
fair point. You talked about authenticness.
Yeah.
So there's this thing around social intelligence, which is, if I were to say management consultancy terms, we'd call it like impression management skills. And what this means is that as a person, we have to have a delicate balance between managing and controlling the image that we portray to others and being reasonably authentic, because we want others to see our true self, but we also have this complex element of understanding that we need to present some sort of image or cloud around you. And that's actually the whole complex element around social intelligence, really. Like, everything that we spoke about is that. Like, I want to be authentic, I want to be this is me, and you see is what you get, but also understanding all the other factors that might garnish or shape who you are. So what do you say to that?
I think an individual's personality, character is made out of multiple components. So one is not necessarily being inauthentic by having a more serious nature or being more serious in moments. The impression management is about being able to choose the right version of yourself to show up in a space. Now, how do you then balance how people perceive you becomes now a very difficult thing, because perception typically is reality. If somebody perceives me to be tired, lazy, lethargic, uninterested, unmotivated, then the reality that they live in, even though inside of my soul I might be extremely energetic and motivated, at the end of the day, I need to meet individuals halfway. it is important that I understand what their social norms are so that I can actually work towards giving them the correct impression of who I am. In that interaction, a lot of the times we will then either be misplaced or misunderstood, or we will flourish because we have taken the time out to meet an individual at where their norms are from a social intelligent point of view. So I think it's a very complex space. You're trying to be as authentic as possible, but you also have to try to meet somewhere where they are so that the interaction between the two of you is coming from a place of understanding. And that understanding is not purely just through the words that you say, but also the body language, the cues, the insults, the undertones. No, but like, because I mean, somebody said I insulted them for wearing shorts.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they were insulted as a function of my actions, and that doesn't take anything away from
Your
my intent.
Yeah.
You know, it is the fact that they felt insulted, and I didn't have that mind or that pre-warning that I should not do this, and so I have to take some of that blame.
Okay, that's quite responsible of you to take some of that on. And I think that it's quite interesting, the concept of having that interaction, understanding how your intent, whether intentional or not, impacts other people. And that leads me to that leadership piece, right? Because we're on transformation leaders, so we do need to tie it into leadership. And I have literally seen followers mirror their leaders. Literally. No, as in the guy starts standing like this, we now all start standing like this. It's like, what's going on? It's like, are we little minions? Like, and I think that it kind of leads into what is quite innately human, like how we learn, right? So in the realm of psychology, there's something called mirror neurons, and apparently as humans, we actually have that. So in our brains, the same things spark up when we watch someone do something versus us doing the exact same thing.
Hold up. So you're telling me if I just watch you work out, I might get a six-pack?
You are not going to get a six-pack, but it does explain why my mom gets tired when she watches me exercise. It's like, oh, I'm just tired watching you like do all those burpees. I'm like literally dripping in sweat. So
it's a fair excuse.
Mom,
No.
exercise.
Okay.
There's no excuse on that one. But it does basically explain why maybe you can get tired watching someone work out, right? And it's quite important to look at how you as a leader portray yourself, and that authenticity and being very knowledgeable of how your actions impact your team. I even had to, as you know, I work crazy hours, and there are times when I realized that my team was also working what I thought were like unfair hours. Now, please don't call me out on my hypocrisy. I choose my hours for my life, okay? I know what I'm doing. But I felt like it was too long for my team. So I'd actually have to leave work. I could signal to my team, okay, we can go home. It's okay to leave at a reasonable hour and just work from home so that they didn't feel like they had to work as long hours as I did. And I think that, being a leader is about understanding when to push your team, when to make sure that your team is rested, making sure that they have the right tools, understanding how you impact your team, because you really do impact your team. We recently had a conversation about a day in a life, and one of the team members was just like, no can be like really hard. Like I gave them a 7 out of 10 and they were so happy they got a 7 out of 10. They're like, that you have never given us a 7 out of 10. And I'm just like, wow, that's terrible. Should I make it a 5? No. But it's just like, because I'm so hard on myself, I end up being hard on my team, but they're at a different stage in their life journey and their careers. So it's having that empathy or that understanding or that humility to kind of meet them where they are, so that,
and
yeah.
That reminds me of something that Bill Gates said, that one of the harder things that he had to overcome whilst at Microsoft was because he was always so hard with himself on certain aspects. Whether he didn't do something right, he would be very hard on himself. because he was hard on himself in that way, he was portraying or being as hard to other members of the team in the same way that he would be hard on himself. And that was actually a very unfair balance between the two, because they are in very different roles, they're very different spaces altogether. And so the lack of appreciation in that regard could actually drive your own team members away. It could burn them out. It could put excessive stress on them, just because you fail to appreciate that the way that they might handle something might be very different to you. And even more so, one thing that I actually felt was quite interesting, or I feel is quite interesting, is you could be hard on yourself or expect an outcome of X, but that's only because your perspective is at X. But really, the outcome of Y might be better. So you might be expecting your team to create it as a blue product. They then create it as a purple product. You get a solution that's 10 times better. And that's where that whole piece around diversity encompasses the ability for social intelligence to come through.
Yeah, I am because we are, not I am because I am.
And it's my rules. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so let's wrap this up.
Already?
Yes.
Damn.
Essentially, we've given little highlights around social intelligence. So what can we tell the listeners who are listening at home around how they can develop social intelligence skills?
So first and foremost, for me, it takes effort and hard work. This thing does not happen overnight, and it does not happen if it's not intentional. It begins with paying more attention to the social world around you. If you're not able to do that, you're not going to succeed. The second thing is work on becoming the best listener, or a better speaker or conversationalist, because within this, both the act of speaking and the act of listening are very important towards the practice of your social intelligence and the understanding of how other people's norms work within a certain space. The ability to actively listen, ensure you clearly understand what an individual has and is providing in terms of what they're talking about, is important to building that connection. Once the one is able to build connection, you're on a very strong path towards building what is a very strong social intelligence bank account, is what I'm going to call it. And quite frankly, those would be my top three. What do you have for the listeners over and beyond what I might have missed? Because I don't actually think I missed anything.
No, I think you covered it all. I think the only thing I would add is maybe working on networking, interacting with different types of people, right? Because if you're interacting with different people, you're also learning different social skills through that interaction. I would even say, if you can, travel to countries that have a completely different culture to you. That is a humbling experience to realize that, oh, my country is actually better than yours, or wow, this country is better than mine, and I thought we were like the best country in the world, or whatever the case may be. So I think that it's quite good to actually travel and meet different people, but also you really need to have that self-introspection. How are you actually reflecting on your own behavior, your own interactions? I didn't intend something to happen, but the impact was like this. And how am I refining that and constantly refining that? Because that social awareness around this, that's the only way you're going to improve. You kind of need to understand that you're going to have social successes and failures. And the only way that you're going to be able to improve the chances of successes is by learning from your failures. And that's all I'd add.
Fair enough. Those were points that I didn't talk about. Meaning that, I didn't actually cover everything.
Well, I'm sure there are more other points out there, but we have reached the end of our podcast.
Well, this was so much fun, and I hope that I'm actually allowed back onto the show Oh, you should hope that because you're on my show.
Yes,
That's what it
for
is.
sure. And I'm humble enough to admit that I am.
Well, in fact, and with that humility, I might invite you back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Shameless. For more information, head over to our website, www.t4leader.com.
Thank you. Bye.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share as we embark on our mission to impact 1 million African lives by 2026.